Welcome to the Filmsteins, the double featured podcast. Join us as we unravel the interwoven experience of the continuous conversation of cinema. Take part in pairing movies with their cursed counterparts, movies that share DNA, or even pairing questionable duos by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/Filmsteins. We offer tiers at the $1, $5, and $20 level, where the $5 tier will grant the ability to request films to further the discussion. So grab some popcorn, sit back, and get ready to join the 100-year conversation. This is the Filmsteins, where movies are more than just entertainment, they're an experience. And welcome back to another episode of the Filmsteins. Thank you guys for joining us today. Today I'm joined by my skag friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
You can join us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with brand new episodes of the Filmsteins. Some recent episodes include King Richard, Memories of Murder, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes of the movie Sasquatch Sunset. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas over on our Patreon as well. Go rate us on Apple Podcasts. Come by and subscribe. Write in. Request a movie, please. Request a shitty Power Ranger movie. Got a lot to choose from.
Suggest a dad movie for the upcoming Father's Day. Are you stressed and filled with anxiety like I am? Maybe in a bit of pain from that car accident you had a few years ago? Well, the sponsor of today's episode, Hempville CBD, has us covered. They have the highest quality products created by chemists and doctors. Hempville carries everything from CBD to THC dispensary grade without those despicable dispensary prices. Order your Delta 8, 9 edibles and vapes along with the THCA flower and get free shipping when you spend $50 or more at hempvillecbd.com. Check out the link in the description for more details.
But today we will be discussing George Miller's 1979 film, Mad Max. Time to culture you a little bit.
Me or them?
Everyone, really. We need to appreciate Mad Max a little more. The beginning's weird. I'm a fan of Mad Max, as we'll come to learn. I'm not a big fan of the original trilogy, but they do serve a special place in my heart because in another timeline, I grew up in the 80s, and I loved these movies. I can feel it. But in this timeline, they also serve an interesting point because they heavily inspired my favorite game series of all time, Fallout, which we recently covered, the new Amazon series, which is very good, surprisingly.
Yep, go watch it.
I will say my favorite thing about the original Mad Max is George Miller's way of communicating ideas and instances that just happen. For example, the most extreme example, too, is when Max's wife and kid get ran over. And then we see, like, the baby's belongings kind of roll down the road a little bit, right? We don't see the incident itself, but we see the dropping of items, and the worst obviously comes to mind. I love that language. That's so fun. I like that there's a little bit of a semblance of this last grasp on, like, the old way of how things used to be. We had society and order and law. It's weird to see the original and then all the other ones that come after because they're so very radically different, and as you'll come to learn. But I believe this is your first dip into the old Mad Max with Mel Gibson, of course. It's also a very old movie, but with a lot of 80s flair, which we've come to learn that you like quite a bit. So how do you feel about Mad Max?
Yeah, I was very surprised how much I liked this movie because something about a movie called Mad Max is not what I would really want to watch, especially with the 2015 one, not really knowing what they're about. So I was pleasantly surprised. Like you just said, late 70 movies, early 80 movies kind of hold a special place in my soul. And it is, but it's not just about them being this pioneering place of time, but there's like this unique charm that just kind of speaks to me. I don't know if it's like the way they talked back then, because I don't know, I love it. I love how they talked back then, and I know this is Australian, but even the Australians talked weird back then, and I like it. Or if it's just something with how people looked back then. They looked real interesting. Nothing like how people look now. But I think it's also some of the ideas that center in that time, because movies today are trying to do something different, and they're trying to focus maybe on problems today or societal things today that isn't exactly bad, but it's just something about the themes in the 80s just speak to me a little more. Maybe I'm just a little more traditional. I don't know, even though there's nothing traditional about this movie, but I like that. Mad Max is there. It's got the weird accent, and I do like how he becomes sick of this world he's in and just abandons what's traditionally right and wrong, and he just manages to get justice in his own way when he experienced his loss. And we don't have a traditional hero here. And I kind of like that because that's something his boss says a lot in the film. Like, people don't believe in heroes anymore. And Max just is that. He is not a hero. He's not a traditional hero. And it's weird. It's weird for us. It's weird, especially at that time. I can only imagine your protagonist is not the hero, so to speak.
But he's also not quite an anti-hero, because he's not doing things for his own good. He still wants order in the world. So he's on this weird little fringe of...
Yeah, exactly. But, I mean, this movie's crazy. The world building is crazy, especially for it not having a source material like I would imagine something like this would have. Some kind of book, some kind of inspiration with a comic. Like, I don't know, something. The introduction to this movie is insane. These surreal elements that just get sprinkled throughout the movie, they're not even there in the movie. Not really. They're hidden. They're flashes. Like, let's see if you can find them. Like an I Spy book. I love it. I love the action. I love the violence, the costumes, and the score. The score is great. The score is very 80s traditional score, and I love it. And I don't think I have a lot of issues with this film. Maybe developing Max a little bit more. Maybe a little bit with the dialogue. The dialogue's kind of off. It's kind of weird. But I guess just that. I mean, some of the transitions are also weird, and maybe we can talk about them. Some of the editing's weird, but I'm not mad at it. And I do not have a pacing issue whatsoever.
Yeah, I hope not. At an hour and 30, it's not a good sign if you have pacing issues within that time frame. There is something very interesting about that 80s flair. It's a so-called je ne sais quoi that's very specific to a time period and transcends borders in a lot of ways, as we see as an Australian-made film. From our perspective of today, and especially those who did not live it, the 80s are very interesting because they feel like a clash between now and, the 50s and 60s films. There's this very theatrical thing. There's this pubescent age of soundtracks and editing. It's like really chaotic sometimes, and sometimes surrealistic without being surrealistic on purpose, because it's just bizarre. It's bizarre movie making time, and I think that's one reason it does have a really interesting place in a lot of people's hearts. But also you have really iconic, symbolic, very good things coming out of it, right? I don't love most of the things that come out of it, but people love Predator, Alien, Star Wars, Terminator, Back to the Future, yada yada yada, right? Mad Max.
Yeah, but we also have films like The Breakfast Club and The Elephant Man.
They're kind of on the other side of what that 80s thing is.
Yeah, Jaws, Footloose. I mean, The Shining. I'm not even thinking about those Alien Terminator movies because I'm not a fan of the Alien movie, which is funny because this seems like my era right here. So I don't know, it's like it's something different about some of these other movies of this time.
Yeah, that's why I say it's kind of a je ne sais quoi. It's one of those things that's really hard to place your finger on, but there's just a feeling across all of those that they share. And not totally unlike that early 2000s vibe, especially in color palette. Jesus, in color palette.
Yeah.
It's the most disgusting era of movie making ever, as far as colors go. But I totally feel you on there just being something there, because it also feels like a lot of these films are made in just gritty ways. where maybe not everyone knew what they were doing at these times because just ideas were explosive and we were just getting things done. Versus, the decades before, things felt more theater. True and true. Like, they just felt much more highly produced in the sense that they were just, tightly scripted.
Yeah, like drama was the main aspect there. We weren't worried about stunts. We weren't worried about making you cry. We weren't worried about a giant shark in the water. We were worried about the me oh my's and, the kisses and the rescuing. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
I like that you bring up the language and dialogue in this movie, too. And I totally agree with you. If anything could have truly improved, it would be the dialogue, simply because the dialogue is so strong out of context. What they say is very good, but there's not a lot said that's very meaningful. So if we could have just kind of molded the really great, almost a Clockwork Orange-like dialogue into something that was a little bit more maybe metaphorical or just its own language, like a Clockwork Orange, where we have this kind of Russo-English thing happening in Clockwork Orange, but here we have this very maybe Australian English thing. I don't know where this comes from, but it's very cool. It almost starts to run this case of just being cool dialogue for cool's sake and it not being all that important, which is largely made up through its visual storytelling and its editorial storytelling. It's very cool. For example, one of my favorite parts of this movie is a small little thing. As you'll notice in Mad Max, as everyone would right away probably, the world is a dying place, if not already dead.
Yep.
And in the first Mad Max, we have a drag of a police force trying to hold on to things. Outside, we have the dying world. And then we go and visit the chief of police at one point, and he's watering his plants, indicating this last semblance of kind of nurturing what once was. And it's so bizarre. The scene is so bizarre. He's shirtless. He's
smoking a cigar.
He's got his tight slacks on, and Max is quitting stuff. It's such a bizarre scene, but it's just awesome. It's kind of, it is like that I Spy thing. It's just, what can you take out of this composition, these set of sequences, and take and say about this world?
That's very well said, because this is not an origin story of why the world is the way it is. It's maybe a Mad Max origin story, why he went mad, but typically with movies that have some kind of post-apocalyptic, dystopian, whatever setting, we get a reason why things are the way they are. That first movie gives us the explanation. We have the Planet of the Apes movies, the recent ones. We know why the world is the way it is because of the experiments. You have Resident Evil, who we know the way things are because of that first movie. But here we don't know why the world is the way it is. We're just thrown in there. And we're not thrown in there when everyone's already gone mad. We're thrown in there like in this in-between. Like in most films and movies, this would be like the in-between season 1 and season 2. Where we rarely get shown this transition of the world going to shit. We're either there at the beginning when we know everything and everything's starting to go to shit, or we're at the end when, years later, everything's already gone to shit. And that bizarreness just adds to that. Or because we're not to shit yet, it adds to that bizarreness. I'm not quite sure which way it is, because we still have these tender moments with his wife where they go on vacation. I mean, who's going on vacation in a ruined world, you know?
Yeah, and there's that functioning diner.
Yeah, that's right.
We're in this weird transition period where you would normally think you'd be before or just right after. But they almost managed to dodge the question of what is happening because maybe it's not so clear to anyone yet, kind of thing. Kind of like the reciprocal of that would be, it takes place so many years after that it doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant what happened before. Like the new Planet of the Apes takes place several hundred years after the recent trilogy. you set the stage in those kind of scenarios for a reboot a lot of times. Things before are completely irrelevant a lot of times. I wonder if there's something specific to the world that's being built here, this unhinged world kind of displacing some sense of order because of the time period that it was created in. I wonder if George Miller is the kind of person to say that the world is going to shit, and then this is kind of what he has nightmares about. Because while watching this movie, I kept thinking, man, this is what the Warriors thought it looked like. This is what the Warriors' violence thought it was displaying.
It's funny you say that because I was thinking with the gang, like, man, this is what the Warriors thought the gang chemistry they had on set was like. Because the gang members here have, like, crazy personalities and just this, like, chemistry between them that I really enjoyed, and this weirdness to them again that the Warriors thought they had. We've brought up several times these weird elements that are in the movie, and they almost have this horror element to them. Because, yeah, we have the scene with the baby and the gun, which that's just bizarre. And when we cut to the next scene, we see the baby in the background and there's no gun near it. So it's like, what? All right, whatever. Okay. I'll get past that, even though you can't get past that. That's something that you're just going to be thinking about for the rest of your life. Why did that baby have a gun? But then we also have Benno. And he's also a weird thing we decided to put in here. He's kind of creepy. Something's obviously wrong with him. He's in the forest. I mean, he's introduced to the audience at the most scary time because we're being chased, and that's the last thing we want to see is someone like him. And I don't know, that was just such a bizarre that was such a bizarre character. Like, that would happen in a horror movie. You're running and you run into this character, but usually he's the killer. But in this case, he's not the killer. He's just May's son, cousin, boy she's taking care of. I don't know, some family member. And he just lives there, and he just happens to be there. And she even warned us, if you see him out there, just ignore him. That's really bizarre. And another bizarre element that I kind of liked was that we kept hearing the radio in the background in scenes where we didn't even have a radio in sight. And I mean, it was to the point where I thought, like, my phone was playing music accidentally, or someone was talking far off. Like, what? Like, it was just weird. It wasn't distracting. It was so low that if I were a little deafer, I wouldn't be able to hear it. But it was just weird. And again, it's almost like these horror elements, but I don't think George Miller is trying to scare you. He's just trying to make you feel uncomfortable. And then you have that scene where the gang member is hanging off the wall in the farm, and that one's just hilarious. But it's weird. Why is he there? And that feeling could also be due to its, like, kind of DIY, let's get creative to make this movie happen elements that a lot of horror movies tend to have. Maybe that kind of horror movie spice.
Yeah, there's definitely something too that you can clearly see some kind of slasher inspiration, or maybe the reverse, some slashers taking inspiration from Mad Max. Because, I mean, there's no doubt this is a horrifying situation, but it's generally not set up in a jump scary kind of way.
Right.
There's not a lot of stalking and hunting characters like Jason and whatever. But you can see that even through the soundtrack, when people would, be getting ready to die, especially by the hands of others, you can maybe hear there being a, like, theremin type instrument happening, or a high-pitched horn, violin type thing. Because you could see the same sounds kind of pop up in a Friday the 13th or Halloween or something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which is kind of funny because I think that evolves over time into a more of a rock and roll metal kind of feeling across the other Mad Maxes. Less horrifying and more rush-inducing, high-octane kind of thing,
Yeah. How did you feel about Mel Gibson portraying Mad Max? Does he have the Mad Max look?
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about Mel Gibson as Mad Max. I also don't know how I feel about Tom Hardy being our new Mad Max.
At first, I wasn't sure either because he's not that guy. He's not, hot. He's not muscular. He's not stoic. He's not broody. And if we're going to play with the madness, he doesn't look deranged. He doesn't look hurt. He doesn't look crazy. But then again, following into my like non-traditional hero thing we have going on here, I'm becoming okay with it. But when the movie first started, I wasn't there for it. Because I feel like Tom Hardy has some of that weirdness, that broodingness that I could see on a character like Mad Max. But I was just curious.
Yeah, I'm kind of maybe two minds with Mad Max, because one thing Mad Max kind of turns into is a figure of legend and doesn't really have any kind of physical manifestation. He is just a legendary figure who may or may not have ever existed.
Oh.
But when I place a face to him, a mindset, a way of being, he is kind of reserved, maybe a little melancholic, but we're also dealing with an origin story of Mad Max and him becoming mad, losing his kids, becoming tormented by his demons. So that process maybe takes some time, right? Like we said, we're on the fringe of order and chaos.
Yes. Okay. I need to give him some time to become deranged.
He needs to develop that mindset. Like in the newer Mad Max, Tom Hardy's very quiet. He's almost like, when he does speak, I'm sure we'll repeat this later, but when he does speak, it's almost like he's just thinking to himself. It's not really directed towards anyone. He's just thinking out loud in a way. And so it's really bizarre, like you said. He's a bizarre ass character in the newer Mad Max. And Mel Gibson is a little more vanilla here.
Vanilla.
But also, like you said, we lack meaningful dialogue in a lot of cases, so we don't get a lot of those intricacies of how Max feels. Of course, I love the double vengeance twist kind of thing we get at the end. Goose dies. He wants to get vengeance, but he wants to do it properly. His wife, kid dies. All right, it's go time.
Fuck it.
By all means necessary. So there's a nice double whammy there. Yes. And then we get it in the kills too, which is very fun. Very theatrical. Very, very cool. So I need to think on my thoughts on who Mad Max is, because one thing that sort of makes me really indecisive about what a Mad Max is this early trilogy, and is the time between the early trilogy and Fury Road, because it only reinforces this legendary mythical figure in my head where there's only a representation of Mad Max as far as the narrator will let you have it, but we also really don't have a narrator in any of them, I don't think. So I don't know, I'm really kind of uncertain about how I feel about the actors portraying him, because they also get a little bit of John Wick energy out of him, which also shares a similar kind of mythical presence. So I don't know, I have to come back at you with some kind of better thought on that.
No, it's very well said, because I feel like the other characters in this film were right for the role. Like Toecutter, I think he did a great job here. He also gave me very A Clockwork Orange vibes, which was good, which I liked. And Goose, I thought he did a great job being that stereotypical angry cop guy, I guess, for this type of world. Even the boss, the police boss, fit the police boss role. We didn't have much of him, but I don't know, just immediately, I didn't know how I felt about Mel Gibson.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny thing, because especially at the beginning, they set up Mel Gibson's presence. We have this chase. It's cutting between the chase and the kind of texture of that sequence playing out, while also cutting in like super close-ups of Max preparing himself, getting in his car, real cool and stuff. And then we have this moment this real, oh, it's Mad Max.
The Interceptor.
And it's cool, but it's not
Yeah.
that powerful for what they probably were going for, at least at the time. And almost every character is a little bit more interesting than Max.
Yes.
So I know it's kind of funny, which makes sense, right? Max is the last character who really wants this order in the world. Everyone else is kind of becoming kind of nihilistic about it. Right? This is just how things are going to be from now on, and we're going to have to just adapt.
I don't know about that, because I was a bit confused with one scene, and it was very brief, and it was between the boss and another guy in a suit. I don't know his name. I don't know what he was. Could he have been a lawyer? I don't know. I don't know who he was, and I never saw him again. But he says, your top pursuit man wants to quit the road, and we have to seduce him with candy. And then the boss man replies, people do not believe in heroes anymore. So I was a bit confused on whether Max...
Well, that's kind of the complexity of Max, and we see it happen when he quits because he's not in it anymore.
But this was before Goose.
Well, yeah, I think Goose was just kind of the tipping point. He was already on his way out, in a way.
Okay.
At least figuratively, his heart wasn't in it. At least in the same way, because the last semblance of order in Max was kind of going away. I guess hence Mad Max. I guess that's the ultimate point, though, of the arc of the movie, is that his mind on how things should be handled kind of changes.
Okay, because I thought he never wanted to handle things straight, and then used Goose and his wife and kid dying not as an excuse per se, but as an excuse to run wild and do whatever the fuck he wants, like everyone else gets to. Because I think in that scene when the boss and that man are talking, right before it is when he's looking at that car, and I think he's doing it secretly.
Is there any reason to believe that the police force is collectively kind of going the same way as Max? Because the chief even says, right, there are no heroes anymore, indicating this lack of doing these extreme things for others. He's kind of indicating it's a dying breed. And so I almost feel like Max is just one of the rest of them. They're just slowly being siphoned off by the way things are.
I think he says that, doesn't he? And he says that the only difference is that he's got a bronze to set him apart, but that at the end of the day, he's just like them.
Yeah, maybe this is George Miller's way of saying that the police and the people who are the victim of the police are not too far apart from one another. That's part of the problem in this film, is we don't get quite enough out of everybody.
Yeah.
We probably could have done for 20 minutes of a little bit more character. Except Toecutter. I think he's good. He's good to go.
Yes, agreed.
All he needs is the personality. He's got the psychoticness down. We don't need any more motivation or anything out of him. But a little bit more out of this law and order thing and how everybody kind of sits on this would have helped a little bit, I think. I guess it's a little incoherent, they might say.
Yeah, it could also be a movie that requires a rewatch, or maybe it requires for me to watch the next ones. I don't know. For me to kind of complete my thought on this. But at least it got me thinking. I do want to talk about some of the editing in the movie. And it might just be 80s films that have these kind of weird transitions or this like weird flow on how you get to one scene, on how you get from one scene to another, or how they give you information. But there was one scene that stood out to me, and again, it was very brief. I'd be surprised if the whole sequence was more than a minute. But it was in between when he had caught the Knight Rider and before we were introduced to the gang. And I think he had just caught someone else. It was at night. There were a bunch of ambulances. And it was just him, the ambulances, and the scene around, and the boss. And the boss basically told him, like, hey, the gang's out looking for you. And that was it. And then in the next sequence, it was the gang. And then they come into town and whatnot. But it just seemed like a weird, out of place scene to let us know that the gang was coming, when obviously in the next fucking scene the gang was there. The gang was coming.
Yeah, it's funny. They needed to connect that the Knight Rider was part of the gang, but they also needed to tell you that the busting of Knight Rider was business as usual. And so he just, is continuing his day.
Yeah.
It's funny, yeah.
I don't know, like, I don't know if that's just the flair of the time, because I feel like The Outsiders kind of did something similar with the scene where Ponyboy is talking about that poem. And it's also very brief. I guess it's brief enough for him to recite a whole poem. And then that's it. Like, it's just that one scene to let us know about the poem. It's like, and I know, I don't know, because I know that scenes and sequences are there to tell us information, of course, duh, but they just didn't flow with the rest of the movie. They weren't very continuous. So it just threw me off. And it's almost like if you blinked or you munched on your chips, you would have missed it. And for a movie that's already so short, having unnecessary scenes like that, I don't know. Maybe it was just me.
To me, it feels like a film 101 kind of class of, all right, we had this sequence happen, we have this sequence after, because, we set out these beats first and foremost. You don't do very many scripts in complete linear order. We need connective tissue between these two sections, and that satisfies that. So it literally feels like it's just kind of a satisfaction scene to make this not incoherent, because it does struggle with a little bit of its incoherency and motive and character, except at the end, of course.
But we could have used without it too, right? Do you agree with me that if that scene wasn't there, we would have caught on that this gang is sad and pissed that the Knight Rider got?
Yeah, you could have maybe seen after the Knight Rider got, his coffin is sent wherever it went, and then the gang shows up there, and then you find out then that they're connected to the Knight Rider.
Yeah.
And then there's some kind of spark between the police force and or I guess specifically Max and the gang. It changed the sequence just a little bit.
Yeah, because at the end, now they're just pissed at the girl, at Jessie. It's not even about the Knight Rider anymore. It's about her and how dare she hurt him, kick him wherever she kicked him. So, yeah, that scene just kind of threw me off. Weird editing, and, some of the other transitions throughout the movie were kind of funny. I'm okay with them. I'm okay with all this. I just thought it was just off. But that transition where there was a crow and nothing really related to it.
No, there is. It's the scavenger nature of everyone in this world.
But why put in that transition? He wasn't even off to the side or, But we do have birds here. Quite a few birds scavenging and eating the immediate dead and whatnot. So, okay, yeah.
That's the connection to the bird, to the bigger bird, the predator birds, yeah.
I got you. Okay. Now I'm not so...
I mean, it's still jarring when you see a bird on, 80% of the screen. It's just like, what? This is so old school.
Yes, it's not on Saw transition level, but it's almost there for me, because we also have these weird zoom ins of faces and some like fuzziness, and at the end when Toecutter finally gets got, his eyes like bulge out and they look very like cartoony, and you're like, what the crap? Like, he hadn't even gotten hit yet. I don't know. It was just funny. They're just funny to me. I appreciate them. How did you feel about the action in this movie, and more specifically the stunts? I know you're not the biggest action movie fan.
Yeah, the destruction of cars is cool, and
it was awesome.
And people falling off their bikes. It's cool. It feels old, and it's one thing I don't like about 80s movies is the action.
No, No.
The fighting's always really bad,
No.
especially in The Outsiders.
Okay, I'll give you that one.
But it's right on the cusp of being really good. It's right there.
Yeah, I really liked them. All the destruction was awesome. That van being crunched was awesome. Everyone getting run over was crazy. I don't know how that stuff was filmed back then. Dummies, I guess?
Yeah.
And then at what point does it stop becoming the dummy? And I don't know. Okay, you're running over a dummy, all right. But then you're running over bikes. I don't know. It just seems so cool. And then there's that one scene where that guy, I think you pointed it out, that one scene with that guy that slid off the motorcycle and then another motorcycle fucking bonked him on the head. Is that a dummy too?
I don't think so. I think that happened.
Is that at least a stuntman?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
I don't know about in Australia. Everyone's a stuntman in Australia, probably.
Oh my gosh.
Going outside's a stunt in Australia.
And then you have that crazy scene when they're getting gas from that gas truck.
Yeah, probably one of the very more modern Mad Maxy things that come out of this.
That was very, very nice, very cool, very iconic, I would say.
Yeah, you have to imagine at this time that Mad Max and its sequels would go on to be extremely influential in that department, in the action department, because whether you like it or not, you have to admit the action in earlier films left a lot to be desired.
Yes.
So we get a lot of dangerous looking things here. Of course, people are suited up, so it's harder to tell when people are dummies and stuff, which is very genius, no doubt, and maybe serendipitous to the context. But the car destruction it's awesome. It is awesome. I will admit. I don't know how you flip cars like that, and
yeah, I would love to watch that get filmed. I hope it's not like a lose its magic kind of thing, which I don't think so. I think I would probably admire it and appreciate it even more. But yeah, that's awesome. And lastly, I want to talk about my favorite part, and it's just a brief dialogue exchange where Toecutter and his gang are in town, and they tell some random mechanic guy, they're like, "We're here to meet a friend coming from the train." And the guy's like, "Oh, nothing's coming from the train except some freights and a coffin." And then they like look at him, and he looks at them, and he's like, "Oh, no, it was so funny." I think that's my favorite part.
And then they go see him, and the guy's like, I don't think that's all of them, but there he is. Because the coffin's small or whatever.
Yeah. And then he's like, I think they took out his heart or something. It was, oh my god, that was hilarious.
Yeah, man, well, I'm glad you liked this movie. And thank you a lot for watching it with me and talking about it here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for making me watch this, because I would have never watched this on my own.
You're a little bit cultured. Do you have a budget guess for this 1979 Australian? I didn't know they had money over there in 1979.
They don't pay in kangaroos?
They pay in kangaroos, and spiders are their change.
Spiders are their change. Okay, my budget guess is 10 million in today's money, so about 2 million back then. But then I forgot it was Australian, so I might knock it down to a million. So I'm gonna guess $1 million. $1
million in yesterday's money?
Yesterday's money.
It's kind of a bunch of hoops to jump through. In Australian money, it apparently cost about $400,000.
Holy crap.
And in American real dollars, it was about 300,000 at the time. Pretty crazy.
What?
And at the time, in 1979, it went on to win a Guinness World Record. Do you win that? Are you awarded that? For being the most profitable movie ever at that point. Landing at $100 million US money at the time.
Holy crap.
One of the biggest success stories of all movie history, probably. I mean, at that point, yes.
Now there's no excuse.
Yeah. Right?
Yes. Holy crap. Talk about... I don't... That's amazing. Talk about the commitment, the dedication, the, like, creativeness, the vision. I mean, holy crap. That's insane. That's awesome. That's awesome. I guess my best budgeter award no longer goes to James Wan.
Yeah, maybe George Miller is the guy.
Now George Miller is the guy.
Well, over on Letterboxd with 305,000 people, they weighed in at 3.3.
Okay. I'm giving it a 3.5, so I'm right there with them.
Yeah, that seems to be a decent acknowledgement of the quality of this movie. You know, its most successful angle is probably the spark of imagination and what could and what will happen. So I'm glad to see that not inflated, really. But I think I'm floating around a 2. I like it more than I did years ago, but it lives in this, you know, uncomfortable space of being almost great, but almost bad. So I don't know.
No.
Maybe 2.5.
No. It's too weird for it to be that low.
Maybe. I'm not opposed to bumping it to 2.5, but that's probably where I'm going to stick.
This movie is going to be in my mind. I'm going to think about why certain things happened the way they did.
It's a weird production, yeah.
It's a weird... Yes, okay, all right. Who knows? I might bump this up.
Oh, man. You're a bigger fan than me.
Yeah, I think I might be a bigger fan than you.
Because that 80s stink is still stinky.
No. It's not a stink. It's a charm.
Oh, a charm, of course. My bad. But yeah, man, thank you for watching this movie with me. And thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Filmistines. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on patreon.com/Filmistines, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe, request a movie, come request the new Mad Max. How about that? But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Filmistines. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives in the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon at patreon.com/Filmistines, and follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is the Filmistines, signing off.